Hey there, welcome back to Farmcraft. I'm John, and this is Large Marge. So, in this video, we're going to be working on the turbo. Now, just a quick rundown. A turbo is basically a glorified air pump. An engine's power output is basically determined by how much fuel is it able to burn and convert to mechanical energy. You can inject more fuel into an engine, but if you don't have more air, the air becomes the limiting factor, and the more fuel will just make it smoke. It won't give you any more power. So you need a way to put more air into the engine, and that's what the turbo does. It runs off of the exhaust pressure. In turn, it runs a turbine which pushes air into the intake. That allows you to get more air in, so you can now inject more fuel and burn all of that fuel and get more horsepower out of the same size engine. So for your turbo to work right, they operate at very high RPM. They have to have very close tolerances, and mine has a lot of play, and it's clearly seen a lot of wear, and it's certainly not producing the turbo boost that it's supposed to be producing because of that. The other thing is, because it runs off of exhaust pressure, if you have any exhaust leaks, then that cuts down on the amount of power that's being supplied to your turbo, and again, that makes less power for the engine. So my exhaust manifold has lots of issues clearly, and we're going to be tackling all that in this video. I want to rebuild the turbo. I want to take off the exhaust manifold, see if I can fix it up, and if not, we'll need to look at replacements. When I bought this machine for scrap value, the engine runs well, but it definitely was down on power. Whenever I would do a function, it would really strain, bog down the engine, and it would smoke a lot. And with the help of Area Diesel Service, we've already rebuilt the injection pump and the injectors and gotten an improvement on our power. We're still smoking a little bit, and I think addressing this turbo is going to make a big difference. So I'm really excited about this video. We're going to get all this fixed up, and at the end of the video, we're going to start her up and see what kind of difference it makes. So let's get into it. All right, so getting this turbo off of here is going to be a bit of a challenge. The turbo is right there, and also here. There's two sides to it, obviously. This is the drive side, the exhaust hookups. And you can see that pipe there is totally rotted out. And that comes to our quote-unquote muffler. So the entire time, this fuel tank, which is much higher than the exhaust manifold, the bolts for that are all the way down under here. So I seriously doubt they're going to be coming out easily. Can't even see them. First thing I got to do is get some shade set up, because that sun is brutal and it is 93 degrees out here. So let me see what I can do about that. That'll do it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect everything that I can over here. This is the charge air output to the intake. Oily. Shouldn't be oily. The lubrication in this thing is going places it shouldn't. This is the oil return line going from the turbo back to the crankcase of the engine. Looks like it could stand to be replaced. I guess when it gets time to pulling that up, that'll come off now because it's pretty loose. So now we need to go around to the fun side. First priority is this muffler. This muffler, also known as a pipe, is not the original design. If you look in the parts manual, it shows an actual muffler of much larger diameter. Of course, that was the only thing supporting it, so now it's basically out. There we have it. Well, that thing's quite heavy. All right, well, I don't have to worry about those bolts. I can do that when the turbo's out. So this is the charge air output pipe that I already took off. No idea what these hose clamps are doing. I really think I'm going to have to do something with this exhaust manifold, but if I can just get the 4 bolts out right here, then the turbo will be separated and should come off. That's what I was expecting. broke it off. Guess that's what I expected. But, you know, it actually does release the turbo. And I'm not sure if this exhaust manifold is going to need to be replaced or not. So it's entirely possible that that really doesn't matter. All right, let's break another one off. I think it's gonna break. Or it's coming out. It's loose, but my wrench is trapped. Okay. Well, the other two we're doing from the other side. Here are those two bolts on this side, and man, they are really corroded. They're not even, they're like 2 millimeters smaller, but I don't think they're supposed to be. I can't really get a wrench on it. There's so much junk. I think the chances of me getting those out of there are pretty slim. I think some real heat is the only chance I've got on this, besides just cutting it off. That's real heat. Only there was a little more room. All right, here you can get a look at some of the exhaust manifold bolts. I mean, there's no threads left on those studs. I do not see them cooperating easily, and I've got too much in my way. This air intake, I've been looking at this. I can take this hose off. This really isn't in the way. And then I can take this off. And then there's just a few bolts over there, and I should be able to take that entire thing out of the way. Get all of this junk right here out of the way, so I'll have access to the turbo, and I'll be able to see some of the exhaust manifold bolts, in theory. Now, I'm not sure what this hose is for. So we're going from the suction side of the intake. So this is filtered air, and it's going to this thing, which looks like a pump. That's going down into the crankcase. It's got a lot of oil in it. All right, I have a theory. That is taking blow-by gases from the crankcase and putting them back in the intake. But I'm not sure what this device is, because the intake would obviously have suction. So what does that need to be there for? Maybe that's preventing too much suction on the crankcase. I'm sure a lot of you Deutz guys out there are probably laughing at me. Let me know what this is, and I will certainly post it in the description. Thanks, guys. And the last two are down below. Well, look at that. It used to be red. Wasn't Proclaim red? I think it was. This machine, of course, was made by Proclaim. That was bought out by Case, but basically it's a Proclaim machine made in France. This heat shield, if I'm not mistaken, and that's a big if, has 4 bolts. I think if I take those out, this whole thing with all of that attached will come out. Well, I just took some time, put the camera right there magnetically, and framed the perfect shot, and then proceeded to take the heat shield off without hitting record. There it is. I can now get somewhat of a better view. There you can see all the cooling fins for the cylinders. Getting that off, boy, I don't know. Those things are looking rough. Let's get my trapped wrench back. Look at this, we're missing bolts. Nope. Had it moving. Yeah, I have it broke. That last one looks, they've got it positioned just so you can't get up underneath it. Am I supposed to do that with a wrench with this much travel? Come on. Well, turbo moves a little bit. It will not twist because that stud broke off in there. I can't even hit it with a hammer. Oh boy. Well, that wrench is on there. I guess let's break it off or make it move. Or just round it over. Ah, that's even better. So this is the oil supply line for lubricating the turbo from the engine. So now everything on the turbo is disconnected except for this one bolt. Well, since I'm definitely doing them anyway, let me see if any of these manifold bolts will move. Okay. Well, that's a good start. How about this one? How about that? Yeah, that one broke. This one seems like I should go down a size. Oh yeah. Maybe even 2 sizes. Yep. Get the coaxer. It's just gonna break off. Oh well. It moved. And oh no, it did break. For a second I thought it was okay. Let's see what this one does. That one came off. And didn't get stuck in the socket. Man, things are looking up. Gonna break. Or it's gonna come out. She came out. One fight at a time. And the stupid washers won't even come off. Oh, that felt good, I think. Ooh, that might not have. It still feels okay. Came off. 2 broken ones so far, and 6 that have come off. So 25% of them are breaking. I got 4 more to go. So one of them is probably going to break. Not that one. Oh, seriously? The intake manifold is in the way of that one. That's ridiculous. That one's good. Whole stud came out on that one. That one came. Whole stud again. Well, they're all out except the one that the stupid intake is in the way of.
This coupler here blocks access to the bolt, and you can't slide it out of the way just because of the way the manifold is shaped.
All right, I've got one of the thinnest walled sockets I could find. See if I can get it to go on the bolt. Kind of on there. I think it's coming out. Would you look at that? Somebody's living right. I'm not sure who, because it's not me. Now, in theory, this thing should come off of here. Yeah, I can see it's that one, I think. That one right there is the culprit. The stud is just flexing. It won't release. So I doubt you can see anything. It's a pretty tight space, but I'm going to try to drill this thing out. See the bits wandering up. I had it right in the center. We have a die grinder with a carbide burr and not a lot of room to maneuver. I used the burr, made a new place to start, and used a small bit, and I'm going up the middle again. So now I'm going to go with a bigger bit. You have to be careful with the heat because these cooling fins are all aluminum. That stud is just wobbling back and forth. Everything else is loose. That one. That didn't work. Ooh. Oh, is it just the screwdriver came out? I thought it moved. That was a tease. Really seems like that ought to be coming out. It's that one stud. It just won't let go. Ooh. Did it move? It did something. I hope that stud just broke, otherwise it just ripped it right out of the block. That's heavy. guess that thing was helicoiled. So the good news is what I'm seeing on the gasket faces looks reasonable. Something a new gasket will seal up once I clean them up a little bit. Yeah, I was worried I was going to get in here and it was going to look terrible. But the important thing right here is it's off. Whew. Well, there's the stud that wouldn't come out. I figured this would happen. As I was taking this thing apart, I was thinking, man, it would be so much easier if I could cut this thing, but I wasn't sure if it would be salvageable. You know, if it all looked like that I could work with. You could machine that down a little bit if you had to and have a nice flat surface. This one is getting a little thin. This one is gone. It's not even flat anymore, and there's barely anything there. And that's on, you know, this upper piece. So that's junk. So go to the lower piece. That one looks okay. A little gasket stuck to it there, but that would clean up fine. This one too. It's a little thin there, not too bad. This one is gone and paper thin. Yeah, not flat anymore. And no getting it there either. So yeah, both pieces of the exhaust manifold are junk. All right, now I have this one last stud to get, or bolt, or whatever that used to be. I guess it was a bolt. It's about to be an 11mm bolt. We're done asking. Something is going to give. Wow. All right, we're going up to 11. And off it came. As in broken off. But, you know, doesn't matter. This is junk. And that is the driven portion of the turbo. And just because I'm curious, I'm going to go ahead and open up this this side. That's a lot of play. Wow, it seems like there's even more over here. Yeah, in fact, I can push it and make it hit the wall. That's no good. Area Diesel's got their work cut out for them with this one. I would take this off, but these bolts are just gone. There's hardly anything there to work with. And I guess you just grind them off and then probably get it apart, and then you can either drill and tap them in the machine shop, or maybe you could work the studs out, weld a nut on after you get that out of the way. But we're going to let Area Diesel deal with that. I got enough to do. Alright, I am going to pack this up and send it off to Area Diesel. I'm going to have to wait, but through the magic of YouTube... Well, would you look at that? I got a delivery from Area Diesel Service. It turns out there were some parts in that old turbo that were going to take a very long time to get. So they ended up sending me a new turbo. So there's that. And then I've got some exhaust stuff, a new muffler, or actually a muffler. Previously, where is that thing? That's my old muffler, also known as a pipe. And then various fittings that probably going to take some doing to get that to work. But look at this, brand new exhaust manifold. Real excited about that. Nice flat surfaces. We're going to get that thing on there and it's going to be nice and sealed up. And we're going to get full use of our turbo after getting all this on there. Big thanks to Kurt and Area Diesel Service and all the guys over there. Good job as usual. I'm excited to see what they did with the old turbo. When they post their video, we'll all find out, and I will leave a link. All right. I'm really looking forward to this part. This is going to be a battle. I need to prep the the manifold basically for the new one, which means getting all the studs out, getting this all scraped flat, obviously dealing with this helicoil. Ugh. Well, that's weird. It was like glued in. It wasn't even a helicoil.
So I knew this was going to be tough, but I've never done an old exhaust manifold like this before, and I really underestimated the level of challenge here. This felt like a mechanic rite of passage. Anybody who has spent a lot of time working on engines and equipment has likely gone through this hazing, where you pit your determination and stubbornness against merciless steel and rust. It's like cruel and unusual punishment.
Can't even thread it on far enough to double nut it to try to unscrew it.
So this is called double nutting, which sounds like something YouTube might demonetize me for. But it's just when you put two nuts side by side and you screw them together, basically a jam nut, so that the nuts grab the stud, and then you can use the nuts to remove or tighten a stud in. Here I'm really having to jam these nuts together really hard because they keep slipping. The stud is in there so tight that it's requiring a lot of force. So I try the heat and quench method.
Did it move, or is it just the nuts? I think it's still the nuts moving. Good grief.
So I go with some more heat. I have to be really careful here though, because these are screwed into aluminum, and you can easily melt aluminum with an oxyacetylene torch. So I have to really monitor my heat and make sure I'm not getting too hot. Looks like I've got a long day ahead of me.
I hope they're not all going to be this bad. Good grief. Man, that thing is in there. And with this stupid little 13mm wrench, I just can't do much. I'm almost thinking I need to just go ahead and weld something bigger onto it so that I can really crank on it and either break it off or whatever. Trying to drill that out is going to be fun. Ah. Well, let me go get the welder.
This is a common technique for removing broken bolts and studs. You weld a nut on, and then you can use that to remove it. Hopefully. You've probably noticed I'm working on two studs at the same time. So I finally got out the infrared thermometer to see how hot I'm getting, and came to realize I wasn't anywhere near as hot as I thought I was. I heated it much more aggressively, trying to get the aluminum up to 600-700 degrees Fahrenheit. It melts at 1200, so nowhere close to melting, but much hotter than I had it. This is still very hot and probably not the best idea, but thankfully this is the only one I had to get this hot with.
She's hot. And it's moving. Wow. Got one.
So I go ahead and heat all the remaining studs up to red hot to heat cycle them once and then spray them down with penetrating oil.
Wow. That one's loose. Wasn't loose before.
I'm going to try to double nut this third one.
It's not moving. It's just stripping on the threads. Okay.
So I spent a full day's work getting these studs out, and I'm not going to bore you with every little detail, but we'll go through and give you a quick rundown. This fourth one that I did while I was waiting on the nut that I just welded to cool, I went ahead and double nutted it and then hit it with the air hammer, and surprisingly, it came out.
Look at that.
This fifth one, I heated it, I hit it with the air hammer, and then just used a pair of vice grips, and was actually able to get it out.
That was helicoiled or something. Look at that.
It turns out several of the studs were helicoiled, and the threads came out with the stud. We'll look at helicoils more later, but these are a strange type because the hole that's left behind is smooth walled. There's no threads in it. That's not something I've come across before.
That one's going to come right out for me. That's a beautiful thing.
This one came out on my first attempt of welding a nut onto it.
So that is 6 down and 1, 2, 3 to go.
This one took 3 attempts of welding the nut on.
Glad to have that one out of there.
This one broke off with the vice grips, welded on a nut, and was actually able to get it moving a little bit, but it wasn't quite done with me yet.
This one worries me. It just gets really tight. It feels like I'm really running into something. Ha! Darn it!
While that's cooling off, I decided to do this last one, which came out just with heat and vice grips. The camera battery died, but when I went to crank on it, it broke off below the surface. Oh!
It's the next morning and I need to figure out how I'm going to drill that sucker out of there. I think there is room for my mag drill here. I don't think it's longer than that, hopefully. The problem is, you know, that's not super solid. Ugh. Look how dirty everything is. And this thing is bolted on. That's to support the exhaust. Maybe I take that off. I'll see if that's strong enough, but I don't think it's going to be. I may end up needing to make a plate, you know, that has a hole drilled at the right point so that I can bolt a plate to this and then put my mag drill on that. It's gonna take a little doing. Let's see what we can come up with. All right, I'm starting out with an end mill just to flatten it out and increase my chances of getting in the center. As far as I can tell, that's centered. It's pretty hard when you can't get your head right behind it. End mill, center drill. Surprised that bit is not cutting. It's a good quality bit. Yeah, maybe I just need to touch it up. Be right back. That's cutting a little better. All right, so I'm drilling it a little bit bigger. This is still smaller than the tap size for an M8 hull. So theoretically, I should not hit any threads or anything. This is a 1/4 inch left-handed drill bit, still smaller than the tap size, but bigger than the last hole I drilled. And it should bite in pretty easily to that.
So sometimes when a left-hand drill bit will catch the stud, it will actually cause it to start unscrewing. Because I've drilled the center out, there should be less pressure on the threads. That's the hope here.
What I really don't want to do is break it off in there.
Well, it caught plenty, but all it did was drill straight through it. Luckily, I didn't break the drill off.
You can see a lot of it came out. Maybe I could run a tap in there now and find the original threads that were there. Would have been nice if I had brought my tap out. I want you guys to appreciate just how fun it is to work on this exhaust manifold. It's up there behind the diesel tank. So every time I forget a tool, every time I need a different size drill bit, I get to do this. May not seem like much, but getting out of here and doing that 30 times a day is getting old.
So you definitely want to be careful doing this. Breaking a tap off in a hole like that can be a real disaster. So just go slow, don't push too hard, keep clearing the chips, working it back and forth, and I did make progress.
Alright, that might be enough. So I'm just running the tap through all the other holes too, just to clean them out, make sure I can get those studs in there. Alright, they all look good except that one needs a helicoil and that one needs a helicoil. So this is the drill size for the helicoil. I think they were already a little bit oversized, but not much. Now we run a tap in there. Yeah, that's gonna start biting right away, so that's good. Helicoil. A helicoil is really just, it's kind of like just the thread. And this is made out of really high quality, tough steel. And this is the installation tool. And this is the thread that I want. That's an M8 1.25. You can see the hole's way too big. So, you know, this is what you do when you strip out a hole in a part that you don't want to replace the part. You drill it out bigger, you tap it for this size, and then thread in a new thread, essentially. Once you thread that in, I'm going to reach in there with a punch and break off the bottom. It's already scored to be broken right there. and that kind of locks the thread into place. That will seat against the wall, and it just doesn't back out. And before long, this thing will be rusted into position from all the heat of the exhaust manifold. That below the surface. Now I just need to reach in there with a punch. Actually, my chuck key will work just fine. There, that's broken off. Don't worry about it. It'll sit at the bottom of the hole, won't hurt a thing. So one down, one to go.
Like the last one, this hole needed very little drilling. It was already a little too big, I think. But I think it'll still work.
Let's put our coil in. We have threads in every hole. Now we just need to prep the gasket surface, and then we're ready to put the studs in. We got them all cleaned up, and I can tell you, they look progressively worse as they get closer to this end. See how rough that one is. This one's got some, actually this is probably the worst one. Got some divots in it. This one looks worse than it is. These two actually look really good. So, I am going to do some high heat epoxy type stuff between this and the gasket on these bad ones, and that will help to seal it up. I'm going to start putting the studs in, and I'm going to anti-seize these things. There's some people that think anti-seize will make it so that your bolts won't stay in, but that's not the case. Torqued properly, they'll stay in position just fine. This just keeps the threads from gumming up. See, this doesn't give me any clearance. Not sure about that. Getting that exhaust on there. Guess we'll see how it goes. I may be taking that stud back out and putting it in after the manifold is there. All right, new studs are installed. All right, I've obviously been avoiding taking the intake manifold off, but considering I'm going to need to be like sealing these faces as I put the exhaust on, and the fact that the intake bolts don't rust or corrode nearly as bad as the exhaust do, hopefully the nuts will just come off and I could just take the manifold off. That's going to make this process a whole lot easier. Come on. There it is. Here's the old manifold. Here's the new one. And this has rings on it. Is it just going to go together? is. All right, I have some concerns about being able to get this thing back together if I'm under time pressure. This is from the old exhaust manifold. I'm going to make some flanges that are going to allow me to basically glue those gaskets in place so that I don't have a time pressure when I'm trying to work on this thing, reassembling. So this is JB Weld Extreme Heat Metallic Repair Paste. I hope this is a good idea.
This is made for high heat applications, including exhaust manifolds, and is good for up to 1000 Fahrenheit, which is 540 C.
Doesn't spread super easy, but I think this will be a good thing the way I'm doing this, because if any squeezes out, I'm going to be able to address that before I actually put the manifold on. All right, we'll check back in an hour. A little bit of squeeze out, not bad. The gasket does seem like it's stuck there pretty good. So I'm just going to take a little time and get rid of any of the excess, which actually comes off fairly easily. Yeah, I mean, the thing's not stuck on there like epoxy. But I can see once you compress that down, that stuff is going to fill gaps and withstand the heat. I'm going to do these two. This is just on there loose. And those don't need it. And we'll be ready to start putting manifold back on. All right, a little bit of a problem. This isn't going to be as easy as I thought. One, I cannot put the intake on after the exhaust is on. So I've got to put the intake back on. But two, the studs aren't lining up. So like, here's the first part of the exhaust manifold, and it should go here, but all right, I was able to get that one on, but it's kind of tweaked and it's pretty tight. To do all of them at once is going to be about impossible. And you say, well, it's a two-piece manifold, so just do one piece at a time. Well, these pieces need to slide that way for this to line up. So that means if any of the studs are in on the second piece, I'm not going to be able to do that. So I think, boy, I hope, yes, maybe I can get the intake on. Can I? Boy, this thing is like a blacksmith's puzzle. Yeah, I don't think so. I think the intake has to be on. Then I have to remove whatever studs I need to remove so that I can get the exhaust manifold on, and then put the studs in once I've got everything in position. So pretty much all of these studs over here I'm going to have to take out, and there was the one that was really tight with the manifold. I'm going to have to take that one out. So this is going to take a little doing, but we'll get it. There's that piece. So it turns out I wish that was one of the ones that I had glued in place, because I'd be able to take the studs out and have the gasket stay exactly where it needs to be. I can probably manage it. Oh my goodness. What in the world? Yeah. There's no reasonable way to do it. I'm gonna have to take these two studs out too. making it fun. Still can't get it on, so all but one has to come off. And doing the gasket is going to be a trick. I may end up having to glue this thing and come back later. We'll see. I don't know why they made this so difficult. Oh, that's awesome. Fell all the way to and through the tracks. The least inaccessible place possible. That is the rule. I don't really need that anyway, so I can put the one stud on that I have. And then get one of the other studs in. Man, this thing's making me want to cuss.
I'm not sure why they designed this thing with studs. In retrospect, it seems like bolts would have made this somewhat easier.
So I'm not sure you guys can see anything, but I've got a double nutted stud back here. I'm using these pliers to grab the far nut since I can't use a wrench. And then this socket to get the first nut off, and that actually is working. See, this is all I'm doing. It's just really hard to reach them. Yeah. But it's not that hard. I'm going to go ahead and torque it down. That one doesn't feel like it's tightening. I don't like that one bit. Nope, I think that stud's pulling out. Oh man. Now that means I get to take this thing back off. You know what, before I do that, I'm going to torque the others. I know I got a problem in the bottom right. I want to make sure these things are right. So all the others torqued, but this one here, the bane of my existence, I cannot get a socket on for the torque wrench. The socket I have that's small enough will not reach the stud. So I'm gonna have to cut that stud off in order to be able to torque that one. And this one I decided to just keep tightening and see what it did, and it did indeed rip right out of there. So we just need to helicoil that, hopefully. Yeah, it looks like that was the aluminum, I think. So that shouldn't be too bad. But that means we get to take this thing back off. You can't take it off. That's taking all the darn studs back out. God! All right, I am going to turn the camera off because it's necessary. And I'm going to take the studs out, and we're going to take this apart again.
It's probably not obvious, but these upper studs here have very limited access, and I can't really double nut them. Remember, I had to take the double nuts off with a pair of pliers. I can put two nuts on there, but I can't get a wrench on the far nut to unscrew it. So I can't get the studs out.
Boy, this thing is something else. I just went to a local auto parts. Actually, there's 3 local auto parts stores. I went to all of them looking for a low profile stud extractor. They make tools for taking studs out. The only kind they had was the big chuck kind that's too fat to go in there. They make them that are like the size of a socket. You'd be able to reach in there and pull that stud out. I ordered some online, obviously don't have them yet. And it occurred to me that maybe I can helicoil this just like it is, without taking that off. So that's what I'm going to try, and we'll see how that goes. One thing's for sure, this is one of the more challenging things that I've worked on. It's just so difficult in so many ways. It seems ridiculous that it's this much of a puzzle to put together. It's just a couple manifolds. Why don't you make them so they're accessible? So here's the drill. Here's the tap. It even feels like it's tapping okay. I now have a threaded hole for my helicoil here. I'm going to count how many turns. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's 1 turn in. That's 2 turns. Yeah. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that should be flush. So I'll do like another turn. There, that should be below the surface. I can take that guy out. Actually looks okay. All right, let's reach in. We'll break off our little tab. Helicoiled. How about that?
So I'm ready to torque it back down. I did want to torque that bolt first, so I torqued some of the others. And the third one that I tried to torque decided to rip out as well. It had also been helicoiled with one of those other types.
Like that.
So I drilled it, then I tapped it. And installed another helicoil.
All right. That is pretty snug. I don't want to risk stripping it out again. There's no torque spec in the manual. I just chose a torque spec based on a medium strength 8mm bolt. And I was really close there, so I'm going with it. Yeah, it was really close to that. There it is. This is a thin wall 1/2-inch socket that I think just barely goes on there. It's a 13mm. Oh yeah, it goes on all right. The impact sockets are just too fat to get up in there. All right. Okay, 6 studs. I've been at this most of the day, and all I've done is install this one piece. I have to say, this is one of the most frustrating things I've worked on, just because it's so hard to get progress. I don't mind working hard. I don't mind things that are difficult, but this just seems, I guess that's a contradiction. But anyway, this just seems pointless. You're just putting things in places and not leaving any room for someone to get a wrench in there, and it's studs. So how do you get the studs out? Like, if the studs could be installed and you could install it, it would be fine. That's what I was expecting. But you can't get this thing off of here without removing those studs. That's crazy. But you can't. Anyway, so now I'm going to take all these studs out. So we're going to work this piece into position, and then we're going to put the studs in as we go. And thankfully those gaskets are all glued on, so those are good. Last stud. And it looks like it needs to shift over a little bit. I guess it would be par for the course if this won't thread in. Yeah, I don't have anything tight on this yet. And it seems like the whole manifold just needs to shift a little bit. Why is the last one off? Every one of them is lined up except the last one I tried. It's not like it was off and I skipped it. I mean, come on. I mean, prying against this thing doesn't even budge. Woodworking clamp to the rescue. There, that might do it. I think that's going in. All the studs are in. All of them have washers. All of them have nuts. All I gotta do is torque them, and the exhaust manifold is done. That was easy. It's pulling out. Unreal. Yeah, they're all good except this one. I don't think so. You have got to be kidding me. And look, there's the helicoil right there. Ripped it right out. I really thought I was going to be done today, at least with the manifold. Guess not. See you tomorrow. I got a bigger helicoil set. This is actually a 3/8/16 set. So yes, this metric machine is getting some SAE products on it. Just don't tell large Marge, she'll get upset at me. So I got to drill that out, and then we're going to tap it and then put this in, and then I've got a bigger manifold stud that will go in there. So hopefully that's going to do the trick. New threads going in.
Well, hallelujah.
So these three torqued just like I wanted. These got good and snug, but I just felt like if I kept going, I was going to rip them out. But I think they really are quite snug. I think they're tight enough. And part of the issue here is Deutz doesn't give you a torque spec. So I'm making it up, and then if it doesn't quite reach my spec, well, what do I do? Yeah, you get to make up your own torque spec. So it's bang on, exactly how it's supposed to be. So yeah, I was complaining about this manifold. Just to give you an idea, I mean, basically, in order to bolt these two pieces of cast iron to the engine, I spent 3 days. It took me a little over a day to get all the broken studs and everything out. And then with all the figuring out how to put it back together and going to the store, it took me another 2 days to put it back on. Crazy, but you know, that's how this stuff goes, especially when you're working on something you haven't worked on before. You're going to make mistakes, you're going to waste time, and it's painful, but just deal with it and move on. Turn the camera off, say some 4-letter words, and then get back to work.
It's like a vowel where they touch. Those are... Good boy. Georgie's a funny. Oh, Georgie, get off. You're not capable. You're not capable.
This is great footage. Something else I should consider doing while I'm here. This is the alternator, which doesn't work. It's looking really rough. It probably just needs a new alternator. But I actually don't think I'm going to use an alternator on this machine. All the alternator does is, all the batteries do is start it, pretty much. There's hardly anything else that's required. And considering this machine's going to sit for, months at a time, I think a solar panel to charge the batteries would make more sense. So that's my plan for that. This is the starter, and those wires are looking really rough. There's a lot of bare copper exposed. This is never going to be easier to access than it is right now, so I am going to do some work on those wires. All right, that's the main battery positive, which just verifying I disconnected. Looking a little rough. I don't have a ring this big, but I have this ring, and it is big enough to go over the bolt, so that'll work. So I've been looking at getting an automatic stripper like this for a while now, and I saw one from Klein Tools, which was very reasonably priced, much cheaper than the Knipex that I've been looking at. So I bought it. This is the first time I've used it. Seems like a nice tool. That looks a little better. Now at least I don't have to worry about any shorts on any of this stuff. The main battery cable looks good, and this is exposed, but that's the ground strap. See, that's just going to the chassis, so that doesn't matter. that'll do that. Now this one's tied on with a piece of string. Believe it or not, I didn't do this. Not saying I wouldn't, but I didn't.
Getting ready to put on the turbo. I moved this from the old turbo. This is one of the oil supply lines.
Gonna put anti-seize on my studs. The real reason I'm doing this is because if I do it, I'm less likely to need to take it apart again. If I don't do it, it's guaranteed I'm gonna need to take it apart again. Looks like I got some work cut out for me getting these lines hooked up. These are the oil lines for the turbo. So I just got off the phone with Kurt at Area Diesel, and thank goodness I called them. I was thinking that if I rotate it, I have to rotate it one bolt spacing. But now that he explained it to me and I see it, that's not the case. This is a compression fitting. This piece here can rotate at to any position here, and then the bolts just compress it and hold it in position. And that's also the case here. So what that means is I can loosen these bolts, I can rotate this until my flanges here line up, which also I think is going to make these line up. And then I can do the same thing with these bolts to get the intake air to line up. So yeah, that's awesome. So now that those are loose, yep, I can just rotate that. All right, those are tight, so I'm going to go ahead and bolt this flange on. Not sure if I can, because it's interfering with that stud. Well, yeah, it's still going to interfere. It's not just the nut, it's the whole stud. Luckily, that's a new stud and I can just unscrew it. Alright, can I now get the stud back in? Come on, Deutz, what are you thinking? You have to make things that are impossible to put together. Alright, I put a smaller washer on there, and now I'm using pliers to screw the stud back in. And now with the stud screwed back in, there's not room to get the nut back on.
So while editing this, it seems like I should have just cut that stud off, but I'm dealing with all stock parts. I mean, these are all Deutz parts. I shouldn't have to be cutting off studs to put it together.
And now, because this line is on, there's not room to tighten it. I mean, it's kind of like a Monty Python movie, isn't it? What in the world? You can't get a socket on it. We've got an angle wrench here. Yeah, that doesn't help at all. Nope. And from the other side, there is even less access. How about a crow's foot wrench? Nope. I might be tightening this thing with a pair of pliers. That's crazy. All right, it is hitting on this far side, just barely. If I take a little bit off of that, I think it'll go, and that will allow me to get another decent twist on it to tighten this thing. Gotta make custom tools to put this thing together. Unreal. Okay, you can see I narrowed that down there compared to this side. Hey, and it goes on. All right. Alright, I think that's going to do it. So now in doing that, these lined up perfectly. So 2 birds, 1 stone, love that. So now all I have to do is get the intake pointing straight up again, like it was. And that's just going to be the same kind of thing. Loosen all of these, and then rotate it and tighten them back down. Just make sure we've got this in the right position. Yeah, it looks really good. Now we're getting somewhere. So now I just need that little replacement hose.
It's in shipping and I don't have it yet, so we'll do that later.
So I was supposed to put some oil in the top of that before I put that on. So I'm gonna have to take this all apart. I think I can get it in just with a syringe if I loosen this guy. Forgot to hit record. I just took a syringe with some Rotella in it and injected it in there, and I didn't get, some of it dripped out, but I definitely got some in. And it doesn't really matter, I don't think, anyway, because I'm gonna pull the stop lever when I get to the point of starting, which is a ways off. I will crank the engine for a while, make sure it builds up oil pressure before I actually allow it to start. So this thing won't have any significant rotation. It'll be fully oiled by the engine cranking. Turbo is done. Now the real fun begins, because this is going to be a custom exhaust setup from here. I need to come out of this. I need to go to a muffler and then a stack. And but I think I have some room to work with. But it's not as much as it looks like right now, because there's a heat shield that goes here between this, the diesel tank, and all the exhaust stuff. The muffler is going to be sitting somewhere right in here, and I need to see what's going to go on with these wires here. Let me go get that heat shield, and we're going to reinstall that, and then I'm going to start hacking together an exhaust system. I think is probably going to be the best way to put it. Yeah, that narrows things down quite a bit. So I need a muffler somewhere in here. It can go kind of anywhere in here. If I come out straight, like square to that flange, I immediately hit the exhaust manifold. I gotta immediately start turning this way. This is gonna take some trial and error, I think. Probably more error than trial. I need to be turning within like 2.5 inches. Hey, that worked. You even have a little clearance there. Got a little clearance, Clarence. Boy, that looks surprisingly good, actually. Looks like I need to trim a little bit off of that, and then those will just clamp together. I'll be darned. That's gonna work. Now that won't go into there, obviously. I need to cut that off, but that'll bring the whole muffler that way, which is actually what I want. Haven't been showing it, but I've been doing this to every one of them. So now I just need to come up with a way to support this muffler. All right, it's time to commit, or at least start committing a little bit. So I am going to go ahead and tack this together. Alright, now this is how the old one was mounted, and obviously I don't think it's going to be at the right height, but right now I'm just going to use this wire and get this thing approximately where I want it. And then I can figure out what I need to do to that mount to make it the right height. That looks shockingly good. You can see the stacks coming up right there. And my opening is all the way over here, so I've got another 5 inches or so. There you can probably see I've got a little more than 2 inches between the bracket and this face here. That's what I'm going to mount it to. That's good because it's mounted to the engine, which, you know, the engine's on mounts, it can move a little bit. And this, of course, you don't want to tie it over here to this, because then you're fighting the movement of the engine. This will just move with it. So I can go ahead and permanently weld this and clamp this, but I have one problem, and this little bracket down here that I'm going to be supporting the muffler with only goes in with one bolt because the other 2 bolts were broken off. There's some other holes here I could use down there. I'll figure something out, but I want that to be a solid mount. The other thing I'm going to do, so I'm going to be padding this up, but I also want a heat shield out over these wires in the starter. There's no reason to have that cooking. I skipped around while I was welding it because I didn't want to warp this thing any more than I had to. Alright, we just bolted that guy on there. It's nice and solid. Hopefully I won't be taking it back off. And I did put the gasket that came with it. So, alright, now we're getting into the real hackery. So I welded this on, and that gives me another bolt hole. So I've got 2 good bolts now. So that's plenty strong. Now I want to come up 2 1/4 inches total, and I also want a heat shield here because the starter is right under here. Now when the engine's running, air is going to be blowing across it and it won't matter. Heat doesn't transfer down that much, but as soon as you shut it down, you've got this big hot muffler just radiating down. I think that's why those wires were all cracked up. I think a heat shield there is a good idea. So we're going to do that somehow. I'm not sure how. I'm kind of figuring this out as I go. All right, so here's the idea. I'm going to drill some holes in this to match that. So that's going to bolt on like that. This is going to weld on there, and then this is going to weld on there. That will be hanging out over top of the starter to give that a heat shield. The muffler is going to be up here, and then the muffler bracket, I will decide where I want it, mark the holes, drill those out, and then the muffler bracket will be right there. Pretty good. Now, did I get the height right? Okay, well, the height is right. Sitting nice and horizontal. I'm happy with that. But what I didn't account for, bracket here is off the edge, just a tiny bit. Guess I should have tacked that together and checked first. Now, the easiest thing to do is just going to be to weld on something more to that side. It really only needs to be where the bracket is, doesn't it? It doesn't even need to be the whole side. So yeah, I'll just weld on a tab. The muffler is in, and it already feels super solid. I still need to tighten that down. I need clamps here and here, and then the stack, and that's it. Got a little ahead of myself. Let me see if I can slide this heat shield down past that thing. And I could definitely see someone criticizing it would look better if those were the other way, but I don't care. I'm going with the easy way. I'd rather put the fasteners where they're easy to get in the future. All right, so the stack, and that's it. All right, so I think this pipe is going to be a good length, but I'm going to have to cut off the bell here so that the stack can go on. I think I need to cut some off anyway, because it has to clear this hole as this cover is closing. Yeah, you can see it's hitting there. So it needs to be a little bit shorter than that. So let me cut off the bell and we'll see how that looks. I mean, that clears. Sure, it really needs to be that high, but it doesn't hurt anything, so wow. Man, I'm glad to have that done. Muffler fits in there well. It's well supported down there. And brand new exhaust manifold, new turbo. All I got to do at this point is put the air filter back in and hook up the air intake on the turbo. So you might say to yourself, isn't that hose all dirty and crappy and gonna let a bunch of dirt in there? Well, that's pre-filtered air. It goes in here, it runs through the filters and then comes out here. And this is where it's clean. And this is where it goes into the turbo. And I did make sure that the inside of that was all clean. This side is just about ready to run through the filter. It doesn't really matter.
That said, I did tape this brake and the hose up with some Gorilla Tape, just because.
Got a new piece of hose there. That looks good. I also rerouted up here. This thing had some kind of goofy hard line that was clearly a rig. And I maintain this line because it's in good shape, and it's also one of those lines that's made to handle higher temperature. Exhaust manifold's right there. This is a little further away, and that's just regular fuel and oil line. So I think that's good. Now we can actually hook up the filtered air to the turbo. Doesn't that nice new turbo look nice? And the new exhaust manifold. You can see it's actually got a seal against the block, unlike the last one. All right, now I did check the engine oil. It's good. So we are good to start this thing. I am going to crank it for a good while and make sure that the turbo gets adequately lubricated before I actually allow it to start. There's a stop engine pull lever, which basically just turns off the fuel at the injection pump. And if you have that pulled, the thing won't start. So that's what we're gonna do. Let's crank this baby over. Been a long time. We've got our stop lever right here and it's pulled. So this thing should not start. So I'm going to crank this thing for a good while. I want to make sure it has plenty of time to lubricate the turbo. I think I have bad batteries in this thing. That is really annoying.
A few moments later.
Okay, let's see if we can crank now. All right, I would say that that gave us some oil pressure. All right, just wanted to take a look at the turbo and the flanges where the oil's coming and leaving it, and just make sure we don't have any leaks. Looks good. My replumbing looks good up here. This guy down here looks fine. I think we can start this puppy. We're ready to start it up. I must say I'm a little bit nervous. I'm not sure why. Haven't started it in a long time and I've done a lot to it. Just hope it's going to run okay. I guess it would be pretty disappointing if it didn't. That's probably the source of it. So we'll push the stop lever in. We'll give it a little bit of throttle. And let's crank her. Fires right up. Maybe a tiny bit of smoke, but hardly any. I mean, it's an old diesel. That's fantastic. I think that's probably how it ran when it was new. Good power, no hesitation at all in lifting up the boom.
In contrast, let's look at what this thing did when I first got it.
So there you go, guys. I'm glad to have that repair done. That was an awful lot of work, but man, that engine is like a different engine. It's got way more power. I didn't even have it at full throttle there. I mean, this thing is gonna run really nice when I'm done with it. I'd like to take it out and go play with it, but I've got other things that I'm working on, so I can't do that quite yet. But I will certainly do that as soon as I can. Trust me, I'm looking forward to it. But turbo, exhaust manifold, and muffler done. Thank goodness. And I hope I never have to go in there again. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one. I hope you learned something here. I always learn stuff when I'm doing this. And we'll see you again next week. I got more repairs that are already underway on this thing. And I hope to have, the next 2 weeks at least, I hope to have videos on this. So we'll see you guys later.